The mocking begins in a futuristic classroom. Zora, an alien girl, sat among her classmates. The room was filled with bright lights, strange symbols, and machines buzzing softly in the background. The air was filled with excitement, as it was the first day of the new semester at the Intergalactic Academy. Students from all different planets sat at their desks, talking quietly to each other. They wore uniforms of bright colors that represented their home planets. Zora, however, wore a sleek, green outfit that made her stand out. Her long hair, braided with shining beads, flowed down her back. Zora was a proud student from planet Xeron, a place known for its advanced technology and highly intelligent beings. She was the top student in her class, always eager to prove how superior her race was to others. Today, something was different though. A new student was joining the class, a human. How interesting, Zora thought, her eyes narrowing with amusement. I wonder what a human could possibly teach me. The teacher, a wise alien from the planet Zinx, stood at the front of the room. He cleared his throat and looked around the room with a calm, composed expression. Class, the teacher began, today we have a special guest. A human student will join our class for this semester. Please make him feel welcome. Zora couldn't hide her curiosity. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and waited. Moments later, the door slid open, and in walked Leo, the human student. He was tall and looked surprisingly calm for someone who had just entered a classroom full of alien beings. His brown eyes scanned the room, taking in the bright lights and unfamiliar faces. Zora's eyes widened slightly in disbelief. Humans were known for being primitive compared to other species, yet this human appeared unfazed. She raised an eyebrow, watching as he walked confidently to the desk at the front. Look at him, Zora whispered to herself. Does he really think he belongs here? The rest of the class fell silent, watching Leo closely. Zora smirked, finding his presence both amusing and strange. She had heard stories of humans, but they seemed so simple and backward in comparison to the highly advanced species she was surrounded by. Zora had been taught that humans were just another species, barely keeping up with the rest of the universe. She wondered what kind of human this one was. Leo stood in front of the class, a slight smile on his face. Hi, I'm Leo. It's nice to meet you all, he said with a friendly tone. His voice was warm and inviting, but Zora felt a strange feeling inside. She didn't know why, but something about him seemed different from the stories she had heard. Zora leaned forward, narrowing her eyes at him. Is this a joke? She thought. How can a human even understand anything about our advanced world? The teacher smiled gently at Leo and then motioned for him to take a seat. As Leo moved to the empty seat beside Zora, she couldn't help but chuckle quietly under her breath. So, Earthling, Zora said, glancing at him with a mocking smile. Do you even know how to operate basic technology, or do you still use primitive tools to survive? Leo didn't react to her tone. Instead, he simply shrugged. We manage. We've gotten pretty good at it, he said with a calm smile. Zora laughed, softly, shaking her head. That's adorable, she said sarcastically, but I highly doubt the humans could ever match the technology of beings like us. The rest of the class looked on, some amused, others unsure of how to react. Zora continued, her voice dripping with superiority. On my planet, we have flying cars, advanced communication devices, and artificial intelligence that surpasses anything your world could even dream of. Zora continued, her voice filled with pride. So, tell me, Leo, what does Earth have? simple machines, dirt roads, primitive structures. Leo didn't seem offended by her words, which made Zora even more frustrated. She was used to seeing people get defensive when she mocked them, but not Leo. He simply leaned back in his chair and looked at her with a curious expression. "You know," Leo said, his voice soft, "Earth may not have flying cars or the fancy tech you have, but we've built something better. We've built strong bonds with each other. We've survived wars, hunger, and natural disasters, and we've learned from our mistakes." Zora blinked, taken aback by his calm response. She expected him to argue, to fight back, but instead, he simply smiled. "That's the strength of humanity," Leo added quietly. Zora scoffed and turned her attention back to the front of the class. But something about Leo's words stuck in her mind. Was there really something special about humans that she hadn't noticed before, or was he just another human who didn't know his place? As the class continued, Zora couldn't shake the feeling that this human was different. He wasn't acting like the others she had encountered. He didn't get flustered or angry when mocked. Instead, he remained calm, collected, and surprisingly wise. Maybe, Zora thought, maybe I misjudged him, but I won't let it happen again. Little did she know, her meeting with Leo was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything she thought she knew about humans. Unlikely first impressions. The following days in class were just as strange as the first. Zora couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was something about Leo that made her uncomfortable. He was always calm, always composed, no matter how hard she tried to mock him or make him feel small. He simply shrugged it off. It wasn't what she expected from a human. In fact, it was the exact opposite of what she had been taught to believe about them. Zora had been the top student in her class, always excelling in every subject. She had mastered alien technology, passed advanced language courses, and even participated in intergalactic space missions. But Leo was different. He didn't show off or try to compete. Instead, he listened, observed, and spoke in a way that made everyone else pause and think. It made Zora curious, and curiosity, she knew, could be dangerous. During their next class, the teacher assigned a group project to explore the culture and history of Earth. Zora and Leo were paired together. Zora could feel a sense of annoyance creeping in. Why did I have to be stuck with a human, she thought. She could do this project on her own and do it better, faster, and with more flair. But no, she was paired with Leo. Leo seemed unfazed as they were assigned the task. "I guess it's me and you, huh?" he said with a small smile. Zora didn't answer, but she shot him a look that clearly told him she wasn't thrilled by the idea. As they sat at a table in the library, Zora tried to get to work. She pulled out her tablet, bringing up all sorts of advanced data about Earth's history, its wars, its leaders, its technology. She had to admit, there was a lot of information about Earth that fascinated her. She flipped through the pages, but her eyes kept drifting to Leo. He was quietly looking over some old, handwritten books he had borrowed from the library. Zora frowned. How can he still use these primitive methods? Does he not have access to the latest digital archives? She thought. Leo glanced up at her and smiled, noticing her puzzled expression. "You know, some things are best learned from old books. The stories they carry are full of wisdom," he said. Zora raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Wisdom from paper? How can you possibly learn anything from something so ... outdated?" Leo's expression softened. "Sometimes it's not about how we learn, It's about what we learn and how we carry those lessons with us. He paused for a moment. Earth's history isn't just about technology or power. It's about survival, change, and growth. Zora rolled her eyes. Survival, she scoffed. You act as if Earth has faced challenges no one else has. Every species has gone through hardship. It's nothing special. Leo didn't flinch at her words. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. I think you're missing the point. Earth is unique because of the way humans have responded to their challenges. Every time we fall, we get back up. We learn, adapt, and try again. That's what makes us resilient. Zora didn't know how to respond to that. She had never heard such a perspective before. It wasn't about being the smartest or having the most advanced technology. It was about something deeper, something intangible. But Zora wasn't ready to admit that she might have been wrong. After all, she was an alien from an advanced species. Humans had nothing on her. As the project continued, Zora found herself getting more and more frustrated. Leo wasn't doing anything extraordinary. He wasn't showing off his knowledge, nor was he trying to compete with her. But somehow, he was still winning her over. Every time she tried to challenge him, he responded in such a calm, thoughtful way that it left her speechless. She couldn't understand it. Why doesn't he get upset? Zora wondered. Why doesn't he fight back when I mock him? By the end of the class, Zora had learned more about Leo than she cared to admit. She found herself, for the first time, respecting his way of thinking. It wasn't that Leo was more intelligent than Hurt was, just that he approached life from a different angle, and that made him more dangerous than any advanced alien technology. As she packed up her things, Leo stood up and gave her a small smile. I know we've had our differences, but I'm glad we're working together on this, he said. Zora gave him a quick nod, but deep down, she felt conflicted. She didn't want to admit it, but Leo had begun to challenge her views of the world of Earth, and even of her own species, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. As Leo walked out of the room, Zora sat back in her chair, staring at the books he had left behind. The words they contained seemed so simple, yet there was something profound about them. Zora felt a strange pull to understand more, to know more about this earthling, and perhaps to learn why he made her feel so uneasy. The questions were starting to pile up in her mind, and Zora had a feeling she was only just beginning to realize how much she didn't know. A glimpse of Earth. The days that followed were filled with uneasy thoughts. Zora found herself distracted during class, her mind wandering back to Leo's words, to his calm demeanor, and to the way he seemed to know things about Earth that went beyond what any alien could fathom. He had mentioned Earth's resilience, the way humans learned from their struggles, but Zora still couldn't wrap her head around it. The idea of Earth having something to offer that her advanced species didn't already know seemed impossible. But as the project continued, something strange began to happen. Zora started looking at Leo not just as an Earthling, but as someone with a deeper understanding of life, one that transcended technology or superior intellect. One afternoon, while working together in the library, Zora finally decided to ask Leo a question that had been bothering her. Why did you agree to come here? Zora asked, her voice curious but guarded. Why come to an alien school where you're clearly out of your depth? Leo looked up from the old Earth book he was studying, his eyes warm but thoughtful. I wanted to learn. I wanted to see the universe, to understand it better. Humans don't just have their own world to explore, we're part of a much larger one. I thought this would be a good way to start. Zora didn't quite understand. But your people have their own ways of learning. Why come to us? You could have stayed on Earth and been a great success there, right? Leo smiled softly. I could, but that's the thing. Earth is just one piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture. If we want to truly understand the universe, we have to understand others, like you, Zora. Zora blinked. Me, you want to understand me? She couldn't help but feel a little flustered by his words. But I'm just a Zeronian. What could you possibly learn from me? Leo leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the stars. I think everyone has something to teach. You might think you're just one species among many, but each of us carries something unique. That's the beauty of the universe, Zora. It's full of mysteries that no one species can fully comprehend on their own. Zora felt a chill run down her spine. She had never thought of it like that. She had always believed that her people were the pinnacle of intelligence and progress. But here was Leo, a human, suggesting that maybe no one species had all the answers. What about your history? Zora asked. You've been through so much on Earth: war, famine, natural disasters. How did you survive all of that? Leo's face grew serious, and for the first time, Zora saw the weight of his past in his eyes. We survived because we didn't give up. Even when things seemed impossible, humans kept fighting, kept learning, kept building. Earth is full of failures, but it's also full of hope. That's why we survive. Not because we're better, but because we refuse to stop trying. Zora sat quietly for a moment, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had been so quick to judge him, to mock him for being human. But now, as she listened to him speak, she realized something. The human race had something that her own species lacked: resilience. The ability to endure, to grow, and to keep moving forward no matter the odds. You sound like you've seen a lot, Zora said softly. Leo nodded, his expression somber. We've been through more than most would ever understand. But that's how we learn. The tough moments teach us what we're capable of. Zora couldn't help but feel a flicker of respect for him. She had always prided herself on her intellect and her superior technology, but Leo's words made her question whether there was more to life than just advanced machinery and knowledge. Could it be that Earth had something more valuable to offer than just technology? Could it be that their strength came from something deeper? As the class continued, Zora couldn't shake the thought. Earthlings, as simple as they seemed, had faced struggles far greater than anything she had encountered. And through it all, they had not only survived, but found ways to thrive. For the first time, Zora felt a sense of admiration for Leo. He wasn't just a human, he was a symbol of what made Earth special. His quiet strength, his resilience, and his unwavering belief in the power of hope made Zora start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had misjudged him all along. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Zora gathered her things slowly. She didn't want to leave, not yet. She felt like she had barely scratched the surface of something important, and she knew, deep down, that her journey with Leo had only just begun. Zora, Leo said, as they walked out of the classroom together. Thanks for listening. Zora gave him a small, hesitant smile. No problem, Leo. I'm starting to see things a little differently. As they stepped into the hallway, Zora's thoughts raced. She had come to this school thinking she was the smartest being in the galaxy, but now she realized there was so much more to learn, not just about Earth, but about herself, and about what it really meant to be truly resilient. The more Zora learned from Leo, the more she realized she had underestimated him, and perhaps In the process, she had underestimated Earth itself. Zora's dilemma. The days that followed felt strange for Zora. She couldn't explain why, but she found herself thinking more and more about Leo and his words. Everything about him challenged her assumptions, the ones she'd built her whole life around. She'd always believed that her species, the Xeronians, were the pinnacle of intelligence, technology, and strength. They had the most advanced machines, the fastest ships, and the brightest minds in the galaxy. But Leo was different. He didn't have all of those things, yet he seemed to possess something much more valuable. Zora's thoughts were interrupted. One day, as she walked into the classroom and took her usual seat, Leo was already there, sitting at his desk, quietly flipping through a book. He looked calm, as usual. Zora couldn't help but feel a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Why did he always look so unbothered, so serene? As the teacher began the lecture, Zora tried to focus on the material, but her mind kept drifting back to Leo. She glanced at him from time to time, observing how he interacted with the class. Unlike Zora, who often raised her hand to answer questions and show off her knowledge, Leo remained quiet, only speaking when absolutely necessary. He didn't try to stand out or make others feel small. It was as if he didn't care about being superior. That was something Zora couldn't wrap her mind around. She had always sought to prove her superiority. But Leo, he seemed content to simply learn, to take things in without the need to show off. After the lecture, the class was given a group activity. Zora was paired with Leo once again. As they gathered their materials, Zora couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation. Why am I still working with him? She thought. I've had enough of his calm and collected attitude. But as they sat down to work, Zora found herself unable to focus on anything other than Leo. He wasn't acting like a typical student, always eager to prove himself. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, listening carefully to Zora's suggestions, but never trying to overrule her. He worked quietly, his movements measured and deliberate. For the first time, Zora became frustrated not with Leo, but with herself. She found herself wondering why she was still holding on to her belief that her species was superior. Maybe Leo didn't need the advanced technology or the fancy gadgets. Maybe he had something deeper, something she hadn't recognized before. Why are you so calm? Zora asked suddenly, her voice sharper than she intended. Leo didn't look up from his work. What do you mean? Zora frowned. You never get upset, never show anger, frustration. How is that possible? Leo paused for a moment, then looked up at her with a calm expression. I guess I've learned that getting upset doesn't help anything. It just wastes energy. Life's too short to be constantly angry or frustrated. Zora was taken aback by his words. She had always been the type to act on her emotions, especially when it came to proving herself. But Leo was telling her to let go of all that. But how do you do it? She asked, her voice softening. How do you stay so calm? Leo shrugged. I think it comes from understanding that I'm not always in control. There are things I can change and things I can't, and I've learned to focus on the things I can change. Zora stared at him, her mind racing. She had never considered things like that. She was always trying to control everything around her, her work, her reputation, her status. But Leo, he didn't seem to need any of that. He was content to simply be, to learn, and to grow at his own pace. Zora felt a pang of envy. So, you don't care about being the best? Leo smiled slightly. Not really. I care about learning. I care about growing, but being the best, that's just a title. It doesn't mean much in the long run." Zora didn't know what to say. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at him. He wasn't like any human she had ever met. He was thoughtful, calm, and humble, qualities that Zora had never valued before. As the project continued, Zora found herself becoming more and more conflicted. She wanted to prove herself, to show Leo that she was smarter and more capable. But at the same time, she was beginning to see the value in Leo's approach. She was starting to question whether her need for superiority was truly necessary. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized something she had never considered before. Maybe she was afraid of losing control, afraid of admitting that she might not have all the answers, and that fear was holding her back from seeing the truth. Leo, on the other hand, seemed free of that fear. He wasn't afraid of being wrong or not having all the answers. He wasn't trying to prove himself. He simply existed, taking each day as it came, learning from everything and everyone around him. Zora felt a sense of frustration building inside her. She wanted to be like that. She wanted to let go of her need to be the best, to prove everyone wrong. But how could she? How could she stop seeking approval from others when that's all she had ever known? As the day came to a close, Zora found herself staring out the window, deep in thought. The stars outside seemed so far away, just like the answers she was searching for. But somewhere, in the back of her mind, she realized that Leo had already shown her the way. She just had to let go of her fear and accept that there was more to life than just being the smartest, the strongest, the best. Zora knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she was willing to try. The revelation: it was an unusually quiet day in the Intergalactic Academy, with most students preparing for their upcoming exams. Zora, however, couldn't focus on her studies. Her mind kept wandering back to Leo and the strange, powerful effect he had on her. Every time they worked together, every time they spoke, something inside her shifted. Her thoughts were no longer consumed with proving her superiority. Instead, she was left with the uneasy feeling that she had underestimated something someone immensely. Leo was different. He wasn't the arrogant, loud, and overconfident human that Zora had expected. Instead, he was quiet, humble, and introspective. He didn't show off his knowledge or try to prove how advanced he was, and it bothered Zora. Why was he so calm? Why was he so unaffected by her attempts to challenge him? She had expected him to get upset, to retaliate, to prove her wrong, but he didn't. He just remained the same, unshakable. One afternoon, after another session of working on their Earth history project, Zora was struggling with her thoughts. They had been discussing the human struggle for survival, the wars and hardships that Leo had mentioned before. It was a concept that Zora couldn't fully grasp. The idea that a species could endure so much suffering and still find hope, still find a way to move forward, was foreign to her. Leo, noticing her furrowed brow, gently placed his book down and turned to face her. "You seem lost in thought, Zora," he said quietly. Zora looked up at him, her usual arrogance replaced by a rare vulnerability. "I don't understand it, Leo," she admitted. "I've been trying to learn about Earth, about your people, but I keep hitting a wall. How can you all keep going, no matter what happens? How do you survive your own history?" Leo paused, considering her words. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, his eyes softened, and he leaned in slightly. "It's not about surviving history," he said gently. "It's about learning from it. Every failure, every mistake teaches us something, and that's what makes us stronger. Zora shook her head. But it's too much. The wars, the famine, the pain. How can you keep moving forward? How can you not give up? Leo's gaze darkened, and for the first time, Zora saw a flash of something deeper, something more personal in his eyes. Because, he said quietly, when you lose everything, you have no choice but to rebuild. Humans have learned to survive. Because we had to. We had no choice but to keep moving forward. That's what makes us resilient. It's not about strength or technology. It's about hope. Hope for something better, even when everything seems lost. Zora was silent, absorbing his words. She had always thought of strength as something measurable, something tangible, like technology or intelligence. But now, Leo was telling her that strength could also come from within, from a deep, unwavering hope that refused to die, no matter how dark the circumstances were. But it's not just about survival, is it? Zora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's about something deeper, something ... more. Leo nodded slowly. Yes, it's about our capacity to learn from the worst of our mistakes, to grow and to try again, to rebuild even when everything seems impossible. That's the core of humanity. Zora felt a pang in her chest, a strange mix of admiration and confusion. I've spent my entire life thinking that our technology, our knowledge, made us the strongest species, she said softly. But now I see that strength is more than just what you can do. It's how you keep going, even when it's hard, even when you don't want to. Leo's gaze softened. Exactly, Zora. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to keep asking questions and to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets. Zora sat back in her chair, staring at him in disbelief. This human, this earthling, had shown her something that she had never even considered. She had spent her entire life believing that strength was about being the best, the smartest, the most advanced. But Leo had just shown her that true strength came from resilience, from the ability to learn from hardship, and from never giving up. For the first time, Zora wasn't sure if she was the smartest being in the room anymore. She felt a strange sense of humility wash over her, and for a brief moment, she realized that perhaps she had much more to learn from Leo than she had ever imagined. "You're right," she said quietly, her voice filled with a rare sincerity. "I've been so focused on being the best that I forgot what truly matters." Leo smiled, but there was no arrogance in his expression. "It's okay. We all learn in our own time." Zora looked down at her hands, feeling a sense of change stirring inside her. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but she knew one thing. This was the moment that everything had shifted. The walls she had built around herself, the walls that had kept her believing in her superiority, were starting to crumble. But there was still more to this story. More to learn, more to discover. And Zora knew, deep down, that she wasn't done yet. The journey had only just begun. As the day came to a close, Zora and Leo gathered their materials and headed out of the classroom. But this time, as they walked side by side, Zora felt something different. She felt as though she was no longer the top student, the superior alien. She was just ... Zora. And for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. The truth unveiled, the days continued to pass in a blur, and Zora found herself growing more and more curious about Leo. He had become a puzzle she couldn't solve, a riddle wrapped in mystery. Every conversation with him left her with more questions than answers, and each interaction seemed to chip away at her previous understanding of what it meant to be strong, to be intelligent, and to be superior. It wasn't until one fateful afternoon that the truth about Leo's something deeper than even Zora could have imagined was revealed. It started like any other day. The class gathered for a lecture, and Leo was sitting at his usual spot, quietly reading through his notes. Zora sat beside him, as usual, but today something felt different. There was an energy in the air, a tension that she couldn't quite place. She tried to focus on the lesson, but her mind kept drifting back to Leo. The more she thought about him, the more she realized there was something she hadn't been told, something important about his past. Zora's curiosity couldn't be ignored any longer. "Leo," she said, her voice low, "you've never really told me much about where you come from, about Earth's history. You always talk about resilience and survival, but I still don't understand." Leo looked up at her, his expression calm. "What do you want to know, Zora?" Zora hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "What makes you so different? You're not like other humans. You don't seem to care about being better than others. And you're not obsessed with proving yourself." Leo smiled faintly. "I've always believed that the key to surviving, truly surviving, is learning from the past, not trying to outdo it. Earth's history is filled with pain and failure, but it's also filled with hope. That's what makes it special." Zora's frown deepened. She had heard that before, but it still didn't fully explain Leo's quiet strength. "But there's something more, isn't there?" she asked, her voice just above a whisper. "There's something you're not telling me." Leo's eyes softened, and for the first time, Zora saw something flicker beneath his calm exterior, something that suggested there was a weight to his words. He leaned forward, his voice lowering as he spoke. "Zora," Leo said, his tone serious, "there's more to my story than you know. Much more than I've shared." Zora's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Leo paused for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the window, as though he were considering whether or not to continue. Finally, he spoke again. "Before I came here, I wasn't just any human. I'm from a long line of humans who've had a unique role in Earth's history. Our ancestors were part of a hidden legacy, one that was lost over time. A legacy tied to Earth's greatest challenges, the ones that no one else could solve. And I'm the last of my line." Zora's eyes widened. In shock, she had never imagined that Leo, this quiet, unassuming human, was connected to something so powerful. She couldn't speak for a moment, too stunned by his revelation. What kind of legacy?" she finally asked. Leo met her gaze, his expression serious but not burdened. "We were part of a group of humans, long ago, who were chosen to protect Earth from certain destruction. Our ancestors helped guide Earth through its darkest times, wars, invasions, natural disasters. They didn't just survive. They saved the planet, time and time again. But over the centuries, the truth of their role was forgotten, and so were we. That's why I'm here, Zora. To learn, to understand, and to find out how to continue that legacy." Zora felt a chill run down her spine. She had never heard anything like this before. The humans she had known were simply a species struggling to survive, trying to find their place in the vast universe. But this was different. Leo wasn't just any human. He was part of a line of protectors, tasked with saving his world, in ways no one could have imagined. "But why didn't you tell anyone?" Zora asked, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. Leo smiled faintly, almost sadly. Because Zora, the world doesn't need to know. The strength of my lineage doesn't come from fame or recognition. It comes from understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the ones that no one knows about. We don't do it for glory. We do it because it's the right thing to do. Zora sat back, her mind reeling. She had always believed that the true measure of a species was their intellect, their technology, and their ability to conquer challenges. But now, as she looked at Leo, she realized that true strength didn't lie in those things at all. It lay in the ability to protect, to stand up for what was right even when no one was watching. Leo, Zora said softly, I had no idea. I've been so focused on proving myself. I never stopped to consider the strength that comes from humility, from knowing when to step back and let things unfold. Leo met her gaze, his expression filled with quiet understanding. It's easy to think we need to prove ourselves, to show others we're the best. But real strength, Zora, is about knowing when to listen, when to learn, and when to act. Zora's heart swelled with a strange mixture of admiration and respect for Leo, the human she had once mocked, the human she had tried so hard to outsmart, had just shown her that there was more to life than proving herself. There was a deeper, more meaningful kind of strength that came from understanding, from accepting imperfections, and from working together toward something greater than oneself. And in that moment, Zora realized that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to learn, not just from Leo, but from the universe itself. She had spent so long thinking she knew everything, that she had forgotten the most important lesson of all. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from simply being open to change. As Leo stood to leave the room, he turned to her with a small smile. You're learning, Zora. You're starting to understand. Zora nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. She wasn't the same as she had been when she first met Leo. She had changed. And for the first time in her life, that change didn't scare her. It excited her. A new perspective. The days after Leo's revelation felt surreal for Zora. Her thoughts were filled with the truth he had shared, the legacy of his ancestors, and the quiet strength that came from his humility. She couldn't stop thinking about how she had once looked down on him, mocking him for being a human, for being so primitive compared to her advanced species. But now everything had shifted. Leo wasn't just a human. He was a living reminder that there was more to strength than intelligence, technology, or power. Zora had spent most of her life trying to prove herself to others, trying to be the smartest, the strongest, the best. She had been so focused on outshining everyone else that she had completely missed the point. But now, after spending time with Leo and learning about his history, she understood something profound. True strength came from within. It came from the ability to keep going, no matter how tough the road was. It came from the quiet courage to face the unknown and the willingness to learn, to adapt, and to grow. That afternoon, as Zora sat alone in her room, she thought about the last few weeks. She had learned so much more than she had ever expected, and yet there was still so much more to discover. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just interested in proving herself to others. She was interested in truly understanding the world, in exploring the depths of what it meant to be alive, to be resilient, and to be human. Zora decided to go to Leo's room later that evening. She had questions, and she needed answers. Just about Earth or his past, but about everything. She had started to realize that she didn't have all the answers, and that was okay. In fact, it was more than okay. It was the beginning of something new. When she arrived at Leo's door, she hesitated for a moment. This was different. She had never approached anyone this way before, especially not someone she had once mocked. But Leo had shown her what true humility and strength looked like. She took a deep breath and knocked. Leo opened the door with his usual calm smile. "Hey Zora, what's up?" Zora looked at him, her expression a little uncertain. I wanted to talk to you about everything, about Earth, about what you said, about your legacy. I've been thinking a lot, and I realized I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did." Leo raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "What's on your mind?" Zora walked into the room and took a seat, feeling strangely vulnerable but also relieved to finally be honest with herself. "I've spent my entire life believing that being the best was the most important thing, that knowledge, technology, and power were the ultimate measures of strength. But now, now I see that I was wrong." Leo nodded, listening closely, not interrupting her. Zora took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I've learned from you, Leo," she continued, "not just about Earth, but about myself. You showed me that strength doesn't come from being the smartest or the most advanced. It comes from resilience, from hope, and from being able to face the toughest challenges with a sense of peace." Leo smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "It's all about balance, Zora. We're all here to learn, to grow. No one has all the answers. Not me, not you, not anyone. But if we keep trying, if we keep looking for ways to improve and help others, then we'll find our way." Zora nodded slowly, the truth of his words sinking deep into her heart. "I was so focused on being superior that I forgot what really matters. It's not about being the best. It's about understanding, about growth, and about connection." Leo's smile grew. "Exactly. And it's not just about Earth or the other species you meet. It's about your own journey. We all have our own paths, Zora, and yours is just beginning." Zora sat back in her chair, staring at Leo for a long moment. She realized that, in a way, she had been looking for something her whole life, something that would make her feel truly fulfilled. And now, for the first time, she thought she had found it. It wasn't about titles, achievements, or status. It was about finding peace within herself and learning to appreciate the journey, not the destination, I think. "I think I have a lot to learn still," Zora said quietly, her voice filled with a sense of peace she had never felt before. "But I'm ready. I want to keep learning, to grow, to understand what it means to truly be strong." Leo nodded, his expression warm and encouraging. "That's all anyone can ask for." As Zora stood to leave, she felt something inside her she had never felt before: hope. Not just for Earth or for Leo, but for herself. She had spent so many years focused on being the best, and now she realized that the true journey was about something far deeper than that. It was about learning, growing, and connecting with others. It was about understanding that strength wasn't about being better than everyone else. It was about becoming the best version of yourself. And with that realization, Zora knew her journey was only beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was no longer afraid. For the first time, she felt like she had a purpose beyond proving herself. She had found her path, and she was ready to walk it. As she walked out of Leo's room, Zora looked up at the stars outside, feeling a sense of peace and excitement for the future. The universe was vast, and there was so much to learn, and for the first time in her life, she was eager to discover what came next.